Hey everybody, it's Matt from endsickness.org. Today we're going to be talking about the things you don't know about histamine intolerance. Okay, I personally suffered with it. My daughter suffered with it. I've worked with a number of clients who have had this issue, and I want to go over some things so that it could help you if you are battling with this. So, what is histamine intolerance? Histamine intolerance is a condition where you have excess histamine in the body, in the blood, stored in the mast cells, and you cannot tolerate more of the histamine coming in. Typically people recognize they have histamine intolerance when they eat certain foods and they flush up, or they have histamine-related symptoms. This is typically what starts them on their journey, discovering eventually that they have histamine intolerance. Histamine intolerance can actually develop because of infections. It can be developed because of antibiotic use, which wipes out the gut microbiome. It can be developed due to a severe virus, something like Epstein-Barr, COVID, etc. But most of the time you have a multiple bacterial infections combined with parasitic issues. That is what's causing the histamine intolerance. And then what happens is the immune system gets overactive, the mast cells, they start secreting more histamine than normal, and then you have this elevated blood histamine, which makes you more reactive to other things that contain histamine. Okay? So infection is typically the root cause of histamine intolerance, but somewhere along the line, people typically have some type of use of some synthetic, whether it was an antibiotic or something that disrupted the natural state of the immune system. Main sources of dietary histamine, okay? You have the simple things, the high histamine foods, the ones that are less obvious, like the bananas, the avocados, the eggs, etc. But most of the problems come from the packaged foods and from meat products, okay? Packaged foods that have lots of ingredients, like gluten-free products, foods that have preservatives in them, etc. Things that have more than 3 or 4 ingredients, not a good idea if you have histamine intolerance, Another one, meat. Meat is typically a problem. I have seen in people on multiple occasions that they cannot tolerate meat if they have histamine intolerance. And most people who are in this situation are eating meat-heavy diets. They're eating 2 times a day they're eating meat, And this is not a good decision if you have histamine intolerance. Reason being is the meat is usually not broken down that well by people who have histamine intolerance. When you have histamine excess, usually you have a deficiency in stomach acid, because histamine is tied to stomach acid release, and you've typically exhausted your resources in enzymes and stomach acid. So when people consume this meat, it putrefies, produces toxins that upregulates the activity of these pathogens in your stomach or wherever they are, and it disrupts it makes your leaky gut worse, which makes you more reactive to everything else. With me, meat was a very, very important one to remove. That was the one I removed last because I was most addicted to it. I thought that protein, I need protein, right? But in fact, that was all just a marketing campaign by the meat industry in most cases. So main sources of dietary histamine for me were the meat products, okay, the animal products, the like the eggs, the dairy, etc. And the other foods, like the things I was eating that were high histamine, I didn't even realize, like the avocados, I was eating those a bunch. The bananas, I was living off bananas. I was having herbs on my food, spices and herbs on my food. Didn't realize that these things all could be contributing, right? So very important that you identify where your main triggers are coming from when it comes to this histamine intolerance situation. You got to go through a dietary log, in my opinion, and you got to knock it out, and you got to make sure you're observing all of what you're eating if it's contributing to your symptoms. What I usually do and recommend with clients is on the left side to write down what they ate, their supplements, right, their pharmaceuticals, whatever else they're taking, and then on the right side write down how they felt, okay? This is critical because you got to observe what's making you worse. What are you doing already that's making you worse? Otherwise, it's going to be very tough to get out of the situation, right? So main sources of dietary histamine, I went over, but also there's other things that create histamine responses. Mast cells are actually the cause of most of the histamine issues because they secrete histamine, right? So you will be in a situation where if, for example, you're taking supplements, okay? Some of these supplements are synthetic. Synthetic supplements do not respond well eventually with people who have histamine issues. They aggravate the mast cells. So people could be taking these supplements, they think the first couple days they're helping, eventually they start hurting, contributing to their symptoms, but they don't think it's the product that they're supplement they're taking because it was helping, it seemed like the first couple days. But the key point is it synthetic? Has it been shown in a study to modulate mast cells? If the answer to those is no, then you don't take it, all right? Because it will make things worse, okay? So key to understand, not just dietary histamine sources, but supplements, pharmaceuticals almost always trigger mast cell issues if you leave them in there long enough for a couple weeks, right? Environmental issues almost always trigger mast cell issues if you have an environmental issue. This could be mold, it could be fragrances, it could be gas leaks, it could be nearly anything, okay? I've experienced it all. I've seen my daughter go through it to the point where she had multiple seizures from these things. So trust me, environmental irritants are no joke, and they can sabotage your whole histamine intolerance protocol if you have environmental, supplement, or pharmaceutical triggers, okay? What you must remember is that mast cells are the main target for histamine intolerance. It's not all just about removing histamine from your diet. It is about calming down the mast cells, making sure you're not irritating them with things you're eating, taking, inhaling, okay? Most common ways of triggering these mast cells, once again, are synthetic things you're taking. Synthetic vitamin C, synthetic pharmaceuticals, etc. Those are the most common things that cause issues. Then you got foods. People typically eat these high ingredient foods, like I said before. Those are likely to cause issues. More ingredients, higher probability you're going to react to something, okay? So you must remember the mast cells are the main target for histamine tolerance. It's not just about removing histamine from your diet and eating the low histamine foods. It's about going through all your supplements, all your pharmaceuticals, everything that you're doing and making sure it does not trigger mast cell activity. And in addition, make sure these things help the liver, don't hurt the stomach, okay? And that they're not synthetic, once again. So the main target to recover from histamine intolerance, what most people don't realize, is mast cells. It's not just about histamine, because the mast cells are the main secretor of histamine. You got to retrain the immune system. Retrain the immune system, you got to remove the irritants, like I just said. Got to remove the hidden triggers. These are things in your diet, things that people are eating every single day. Most of the time it's meat products. People are eating meat 2-3 times a day, wondering why they have histamine intolerance symptoms, saying, I'm reacting to vegetables. I'm reacting. No, you're reacting to those things because you're eating meat multiple times a day. The food's not breaking down your stomach, it's putrefying, it's causing toxic release, that's making your infection worse, and it's making your immune system more irritated, okay? So you have to remove these irritants in the diet. Number 1, meat. Number 2, packaged foods, like I said. Number 3, supplements that are synthetic or not mast cell modulators. Number 4, any pharmaceutical, pretty much, right? All these things, the key to remember is if it's synthetic, it is usually a problem. Even if it seems to help initially, within a couple weeks it's going to cause you an issue, in my experience, okay? So you have to retrain the immune system first by removing the irritants. Second, you got to add different mast cell modulators in there that are derived from plants. Things like B. propolis, bifidobacterium, even bovine colostrum, which is an animal fat or animal-based product, that's helpful. Apigenin, bicillin, various flavonoids, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, Lactobacillus plantarum. Everything you do must modulate mast cells, otherwise you should not be doing it because it will make things worse, okay? So to retrain the immune system, you must make sure you're not already doing things that are making things worse. That's the most important thing, that you're not eating things that are triggering you, that you've created a dietary log, that you've observed what you're eating, that you make sure that you're not eating things that are making your symptoms worse, right? So the key to retraining the immune system, in my opinion, is creating a supplement or dietary/symptom log. A log where you write down what you eat, what you took on the left side, on the right side you write down how you felt, okay? You should notice your symptoms go up and down. If they do, it's due to something you're taking. If your symptoms are steady and do not get affected by anything you're taking or eating, it's usually an environmental issue, okay? Usually you're inhaling something or you're taking a pharmaceutical that's sabotaging the healing process and the reconditioning of the immune system. That has been my experience. So living a low histamine lifestyle, I personally enjoy it. I love it. The lower your histamine levels are, the higher the dopamine is in most cases. Histamine is, in most cases, responsible for that racing mind, and responsible for muscle tightness, responsible for inflammation, responsible for lots of things that you do not want, okay? So you want to reduce your histamine levels for that reason, but also histamine competes with dopamine in the brain, in the receptors. So if you are high histamine in your brain, then you're low dopamine. You're low dopamine, you're low motivation, you don't have a whole lot of interest in things, you're not happy, you just don't have that blissful neurotransmitter, right? So people don't realize histamine is a neurotransmitter, and it will compete with dopamine, all right, and GABA, two of your most important neurotransmitters. So living the low histamine lifestyle has tons of benefits, all right? I've seen it work miracles in my life. I've seen it work miracles in my daughter's life. I've seen it affect various clients of mine. So don't get too caught up in the idea that, oh, I can't have these foods now. Oh, man, it's going to be so horrible. It's the addiction speaking. It's the addiction of these foods that are speaking. Give it 2-3 weeks. It should be pretty easy after that to maintain. Key points I want to go over. Histamine intolerance is caused by excess histamine. It's not just about reducing the histamine intake of biogenic amines like histamine in your diet. It's about reducing the intake of triggers, okay, in your diet, your supplements, your pharmaceuticals, your environment. Reducing your exposure to these things, because mast cells are the most likely to cause histamine excess in the body. If you have normal mast cell function, you will not have histamine intolerance, okay? If you have a overactive mast cell situation, you have a much higher likelihood of developing elevated histamine levels. Main sources of dietary histamine, don't be too concerned about the plants, vegetables, starches. I'd be mostly focused on meat, spices, processed foods, eating out, animal products. Those are the things I've seen that cause the biggest issues, okay? Mast cells, main target is not just about histamine, it's about the mast cells. Everything you're doing has to calm down the mast cells. If it doesn't, stop doing it, because it's hurting, okay? You must retrain the immune system to be successful long term. This is removing all the irritants, in all forms. This will allow your immune system to heal itself and naturally secrete anti-inflammatory chemicals, not inflammatory ones like it's doing right now. In the low histamine lifestyle, it's awesome. It's good for people who have stomach issues, who have histamine intolerance, who have mast cell issues, who have mental health issues, etc. Histamine has been shown to be the primary driver of inflammation for a number of conditions. So lower the histamine, the better when you have chronic inflammation. So living a low histamine lifestyle is really not that bad. Trust me, it really isn't. And you must remember also, histamine intolerance developed typically from infections or a disruption of the gut microbiome from antibiotics or some synthetic exposure to something, or some virus that you get like COVID, Epstein-Barr. You must remember where it developed, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get to the root cause. You have to be able to address where this started, create a theory as to why your histamine levels are elevated, and then you got to address it accordingly, okay? And you got to restore the gut microbiome. You got to calm down the immune system with various mast cell modulators. But you have to remember where this developed so you don't make the same mistake. If it was from antibiotic use, it happened after antibiotics. If it happened after, some surgery that you had where you took antibiotics, it happened after some chemical exposure, etc., right? But you have to remember these things, otherwise you can't get to the root cause and actually the underlying issue. So I hope this has been a good summary about histamine intolerance and things you don't know. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. You can put them in the comments or visit the website endsickness.org. Please remind yourself this is not intended to be medical advice. This is for educational purposes only. This is from my personal experience, my experience with my daughter and my clients in the scientific literature I've come across. So thanks for listening, everybody. Hope to hear from you if you have any questions, and I'll see you soon.